Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 4 coverage of the U.S. Chess Championships taking place in St. Louis, Missouri. From round 4 I selected this game between Agata Bykovtsev and Irina Krush, played in the Women's Championship. Irina Krush has the black pieces, Bykovtsev with the white pieces. Irina is not yet in the lead in this tournament, but had a bit of a slow start, but we'll see how she does in this game. Bykovtsev starts off with e4. We get c5. So a Sicilian defense from Irina. Knight f3, d6, so normal Sicilian, and now knight c3. Bit of a rare move here. I mean, normally white goes immediately for the open Sicilian with d4, but this is a very flexible move. It keeps the options open. But one thing it does is it blocks the c-pawn, so black no longer needs to worry about white going in for a Maroczy bind. So black in this circumstance can develop this knight first, the knight on c6. Not that it seems to make a whole lot of difference, but normally you would see black playing knight f6 here to attack the e-pawn and force knight c3, but knight c3 has already been played. Okay, so Agata continues with bishop c4. Now we get knight f6 anyway, just natural deployment. And at this point, Agata goes for the open Sicilian with d4. It's still possible to play a closed Sicilian with d3 here. But after d4, c takes, knight takes, we get a typical, actually is this a main line position of the classical Sicilian with the two knights. And I play the classical Sicilian myself, so I was interested to see this game. And white's setup is known as the Fischer-Sozin attack, the early development of the bishop here, looking at the f7 square and also setting up for a quick kingside castling. That's the idea of white's setup here. So e6, the move that Irina played, is one of the main moves here, just blocking that diagonal. White castles, black continues to develop, bishop e7, bishop back to b3. This bishop has to drop back at some point. It's a little bit loose on the c4 square, so that's fine. a6, preparing perhaps to play b5, which also would have kicked that bishop anyway, and maybe even push on with b4, a common idea in this setup. Although you have to be careful that I've seen people lose their knight on c6 because they play b5 there before defending the knight. So you need to make sure you take care of your knight there on c6. And right here, Agata plays king h1, which is a bit of a rare move and appears to lead to some kind of equal position. So probably she's playing some sideline on purpose, not going for the main line. But the main line just continues with bishop e3, just a natural developing move, and that's probably the best move here, really. So king h1, wandering a bit away from the beaten path. Black castles. And then Agata pushes on with f4. Now this is not unknown. This has all been seen before. At this point, Irina trades off her c6 knight so that she can play b5 without any loss of tempo. That exchange comes with tempo, and then b5 comes in very quickly. And and Agata pushes on with f5. So both sides are pushing their pawns, and Irina continues here with b4. And she mentioned in the interview afterwards that she had prepared this line. So maybe she's talking about the move b4 here. There was one move in the one game in the opening database where this has been played, so it's not an unknown move, but certainly a bit of a rare move, pushing on with b4. And it's an interesting move too. It's a pawn sack. But it turns out to only be a temporary pawn sack. So if white grabs the pawn, this is not what was played in the game, but if white takes the pawn, then the point is d5. d5 kicks the queen, and if the queen wants to stay in touch with this pawn so as not to lose the e-pawn, but it turns out it can't be held. Let's see, if the queen goes over here to a4, the other bishop will kick it. So eventually the queen gets chased to the d4 square. It can just go here right away. It's all about the same. And then black can take on e4 right away. And the point is this queen on the d4 square is hanging. It's a loose queen. And it can't take the pawn because the pawn is defended by the knight. So there's nothing else for the queen to do well, it could retreat, but nothing better than just trading here. And after rook takes d6, then white can grab this pawn, well, trade off that f pawn that was loose. And then in this material, in this position, black has regained the material. Black has this extra pawn on, well, got this pawn on e4 here now. So this is an interesting position. Both sides have the bishop pair. The queens are off. It's not quite an in-game position because there's still a lot of force. So you might think of this as a queenless middle game. And this advanced pawn could be a strength. Particularly later in the endgame, it becomes a passed pawn. But it could also be a weakness. And overall, the chess engine rates this position as about even. So you can take that pawn. And that's probably the best way to play, actually, is to go ahead and grab that pawn. But perhaps Agata, not wanting to go into those complications, or viewing the resulting position as kind of unclear or perhaps even favorable to black. That passed pawn looks kind of menacing. She tried something else, a different move, knight e2. Keeping the material on, not trading queens, keeping the position complicated. But it seems like somehow black gets some initiative from this point forward. So it's pretty interesting. This subtle b4 move seems to have changed the position in black's favor. So I think that's what Irina Krush was talking about when she mentioned her opening preparation. Anyway, she pushes on with e5. Cancel that. Let's see, it's, knight e2, e5, sorry, e5 kicking the queen. Queen drops back to d3, and now e5, just supporting that pawn on b4, so that pawn is no longer available to be taken. Bishop to g5, developing the last piece, and bishop to a6. And what we see now is that black, Irina gets a bunch of tempo moves, and these moves improve her position. So I guess that's part of the hidden compensation in this position for, well, it's not compensation, but the obscure advantage that black has. Apparently it comes from piece activity. You would think structurally black is a little bit worse because of the backwards d pawn, but well, we'll see all these tempo moves. So we see bishop a6 kicking the queen. Agata decides to interpose with the bishop. We get a trade. And then we get another tempo move, knight to g4. So now the knight is looking at these squares, and also the bishop is under attack. And if this bishop gets traded off, then knight to knight to e3 there is a fork of the queen and the rook. So this has to be managed carefully by white. She goes bishop takes e7, queen takes, and then drops her queen back to d3 to protect that e3 square and get away from the fork. And now queen h4, a third tempo move. So we had three, in short succession. They weren't right after the other, but pretty much following on the heels. First the bishop move with tempo, then the knight move with tempo, and now the queen comes out and very simply threatens checkmate. So all pretty straightforward here. And if you try to block with h3, then the knight is coming into f2 with the check, forking the king and queen and losing the exchange. Rook takes, knight is forced there. So so the only move here is queen to g3. And after the queens come off, let's see, she takes with the knight. That's probably the best way to keep the pawns together there in front of the king. And now Irina plays rook f to c8. Cancel that. And taking a look at this loose pawn. And so in this position, once again, if you're not looking too closely at the details, it might seem like white should be doing fine. The material is even, and black has this backwards d pawn that white should be able to gang up on. But black's advantage has persisted from the positions we saw earlier. She still has more active pieces. This knight near the king is capable of generating a lot of interesting threats. And this rook immediately is looking at the loose pawn on c2. And actually, if you look at this position with the chess engine turned on, it gives black already a +1 advantage roughly. So it's like somehow black is material up, or the activity of the pieces is worth a pawn at least. So and she didn't have to sacrifice a pawn to get that activity. So it looks like black is definitely in the driver's seat here. Agata defends with rook a to c1. Rook to c4 was played, starting to put pressure on this pawn, and now the knight can hop back here, and the rook and the knight can combine to attack the e-pawn. And also, if this rook goes for a counterattack, notice that this knight is poised to come in with the fork, check the king, and pick up the rook over there. So this knight is really hindering the development of white's pieces, the placement of them. They have to be very careful where they step. So rook f to e1 was played to defend this pawn in advance in a way. It also frees up this knight to move if necessary. Rook a to c8, just doubling on the c-file, and now rook to e2. So a very careful maneuver to bring this rook over to where it could defend, and at the same time staying away from checks from this knight here. Now king to f8, just bringing the king a little closer. King to g1, and g6, going for breaking up this pawn center a little bit, the advanced pawn. If black can actually get rid of this e-pawn by trading it off or pulling it over the f-file, then this central pawn duo from black will become a big menace. So Agata tries h3 here, just kicking the knight back first. The knight drops back to f6, and then this rook goes to f1. So momentarily abandoning the c-pawn, but with the idea of taking over here on g6 and threatening that undefended knight. So Irina takes a move here to defend the knight and also bring the king closer to the center, and that gives Agata time to organize her rooks so they're lined up this way. So it seems like she's cleverly holding everything together. But now the move h5 comes, and this is a big threat here because h4 will hit that knight, and it doesn't have any good squares. Let's see. So Agata, to deal with this, she starts by playing b3, kicking this rook. Rook goes to d4. So that frees up one of these rooks to move so that she doesn't need both of them defending the pawn here. And now h4, stopping the pawn from advancing and kicking this knight away. If black got in the move h4, this would just collapse. White would just lose control, would lose the pawn on e4 and lose control of the center here. So h4 was played. In this position, the chess engine thinks that it's slightly better to take first. So f takes g6, pawn takes g6, then h4. But both this continuation and the one in the game have the same problem, which is this knight comes in here and can't be chased away anymore because the h-pawn has come forward, and it's hitting the rook. If the rook goes back, then the rook's coming to the third rank will attack this loose knight here. So rook to f3 would be played as the chess engine continuation, and then just king to e6. I wanted to show this because this ends up in some kind of position where it seems like white has just really limited moves. It seems like black just runs white out of moves. So, and once again, it's a position where it's a little bit hard to understand why black is so much better. But, well, black has a tremendous amount of space, which you can see by looking at it. Has this active knight, and white's pieces are all clustered around her king. So, anyway, interesting position. In the game, h4 was played right away, and this seems to go downhill even quicker. Let's see, Irina plays rook to c3. Rook to f3 was played here to defend the knight. If the king comes up to defend the knight, then in this position, the king can't defend the knight because the knight will come in here with check and pick up the rook, or at least the exchange. So defending with rook to f3, and the knight really didn't have a great square to go to. Now rook to d1 check, chasing the king to h2, and now the knight hops into g4 with check anyway, and forces the king up to h3. And if you've you should start to see mating patterns showing up on the board at this point because of the nature of the king position. Let's see, rook to c1 was played, just ganging up on this defenseless c2 pawn. There's no longer any way to defend it. Let's see. F takes g6 was thrown in. That doesn't make a big difference. And then rook to d3 was played, just giving up on the pawn, rook to d3. But if you tried to save that pawn, say, for example, let's back up. If you played rook takes c3, pawn takes c3, this is that position where you just run out of moves again. Basically, the only pawn you can move is the a-pawn. Say you go up to here, and black can, say, move somewhere along the back rank. And this is just an amazing position. This rook has no squares it can go to. The knight controls that square, the rook controls that square, pawn controls that square, and the knight controls that square. So that rook can't move. This knight, where can the knight go? It can't go here, 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 here. And if it goes to the back rank, it's taken. So that knight has no moves. The king has no legal moves. These pawns have no moves. So the only pawns that can be moved, the only moves that white has are to push these pawns forward, and then black just takes these pawns and wins just by pushing the pawns forward on the queen side. So a great example of Zugzwang. Let's see. So Agata didn't go for that, but just gave up the pawn here. But this turns out to be hopeless as well. After rook d3, Irina took on c2. Then rook d5 was played. And now the rook just goes back to c3. And at this point, Agata resigned. There's actually a mate threat here that can't be stopped. Just rook to h1 is checkmate, and there's no way to prevent it at this point. So anyway, a very nice game from Irina. She really had control all the way through, and also good to see her winning with the classical Sicilian, since that's one of my openings. So let's take a look at the standings. We have so we have 3 players now in the Women's Championship that are tied. Tatev Abrahamian, Nazi Paikidze, and Irina Krush. So Irina Krush made her way into the top group. And Anna Zitansky, her main rival, is just a half point back at 2.5 points. And also Carissa Yip is there at 2.5 points there. And then the remaining players, we have Jennifer Yu and Sabina Feuser at 2 points. We have Agata Bykovtsev and Katerina Nemkova at 1.5, and Alyssa Melakina, Ashrita Eswaran, and Akshita Gordy at 1 point apiece. There was a nice game, actually I should mention. Anna Zitansky defeated Alyssa Melakina in a very nice game where Alyssa played the the Benko Gambit, and Anna Zitansky grabbed the pawn and held on to it, and managed to get a nice win there. Okay, let's take a look at the men's championship. On the men's side, it was, the Open Championship. The let's standings. Here we go. The on the Open Championship, all the games were drawn except for one, and that was the game between Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura, and Fabiano won that one. So now Fabiano has pulled into the sole lead at 3.5 points. And then his closest competitors, Ray Robson and Wesley So, are just half a point behind. So those are the most likely contenders at this point. Well, it's still only 4 rounds out of 11, so a lot of chess still to be played. Sam Shanklin is back there at 2.5 points. Jeff Zhang, Alexander Onishik, and Hikaru Nakamura are at 2 points. So not a good result for Hikaru, but everybody else is doing pretty well. And let's see, Akshat Chandra managed to score another draw, so he's at 1 point, along with Alex Linderman and Vruzhin Akobian, and Gatakomsky and Alexander Shabalov are at 1.5 points each. So nice tournament shaping up. Hope you guys are enjoying this coverage, and I will see you again soon.